Open Minds Media.
Indiana County 911. My brother's gone. Can you be a little more specific, sir? He took my brother. Who took him? I don't know who took him. I don't know what. Sir, take a breath. Explain to me what happened.
And I looked out and there was this big red blinking UFO.
I can just say this. Something's going on in the woods. Something's going on.
They're not dogs, they're not coyotes. What could it be, right?
I had an encounter with a skunk ape, and it completely altered the course of my life.
I found a skull. Are you guys going to want to come film this?
Put him out.
I just see it.
Sightings of a UFO hovering over a barn.
Millie woke up from a dream, and when I went into the bedroom, she said there's a monster on the wall.
They saw that the creature had run through a barbed wire fence. They were able to obtain hairs. They sent the hairs to their lab, and it came back as an unknown creature.
Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to the most bizarre show on the internet. I am the one that, like one person, calls Shayn SQUATCH.
And I am the big bad boo daddy, Orin Felix.
And surprisingly, a lot of people call you that. I'm sure that that's probably become like your new like pet name at home. Like Jenny's like, come here, big bad boo daddy.
Not once ever.
God damn it. I was really hoping so because it sounds super cringy, and cringy is perfect.
Yeah, that one has not extended to the bedroom yet. So.
It could. I was not trying to go that far with it. I was just saying in normal life, like, you know, oh, can you pass me the salt, you big bad boo daddy? You know,
like calling bullshit on that. There was definitely sexual innuendo in your voice when you said that just a second ago.
It's just the name because it says daddy at the end. Like, I feel cringy saying that word, even being like a dad. Like when I get called daddy, like by my kids, it still fucking is like, ugh.
You don't like it?
I don't like it.
That's not your kink?
It's not my kink at all.
Okay. Well, speaking of kinks, but not really, there's no good segue to this. We've got a little bit of news and updates for this show before we get started. With the holidays coming up and first of the year, we know everything's kind of hectic for you guys and for us too. So we're going to try to streamline some of the social media platforms and the email addresses and whatnot for Open Minds Media and for the show. So Shayn, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about that?
So first and foremost, I kind of figured that there's probably not a need for an Open Minds Media page for Instagram and Facebook. So everybody wants to go and follow the podcast pages. So Bizarre Encounters is going to stay the same. Inquiries of Our Reality is going to stay the same. Open Minds Media on Instagram and Facebook isn't going to be a thing anymore. But on the other side of that, trying to, again, make stuff a little bit easier and consolidate stuff all in one place for YouTube, TikTok, and now the Telegram, which I'll get into in a minute. We're going to just be keeping that under Open Minds Media, so then we can post inquiries and we can post Bizarre Encounters all in one place. I figured most people kind of use their production company for YouTube and TikTok anyway, so it kind of fits and just kind of make stuff a little bit easier. And again, speaking of making things a little bit easier, for the Discord that we've had for a while, I feel like it's just way too chaotic, as Orin would mention over here. And I feel like it's just going to be a lot more user-friendly to switch over to Telegram, because with Discord, there's like the server, and then there's like a bunch of little mini sub-servers, and it's like if everybody's talking in just one sub-server, it makes it look like the whole entire server is dead. So rather than doing that and making it where, you know, most people don't want to pop in because Discord isn't exactly the most user-friendly. It's, you know, more for people that are on the internet messing around with stuff regularly. Switching over to Telegram, single feed, everybody can kind of talk all in one place. And as far as being user-friendly, I mean, you basically just come in. There's one text channel all the way down. So, you know, if anybody was like, oh, Discord's a little bit too much for me, there you go. Made it a little bit easier. Got the Telegram all set up back up for you guys again. The Discord is shut down probably at this point by the time that I'm bringing this up. But if anybody wants to go and check out the Telegram, there will be a link available down in the show description, of course.
And I'm one of those people that the Discord was just too chaotic and too much for. So I fall squarely in that camp.
And again, even making it easier, 2 shows all in one place. You guys can go and check out the Open Minds Media Telegram and talk about Bizarre Encounters and talk about inquiries, and again, consolidate it all in one place. We need to bring all the community together instead of having us all divided between the 2 different shows, because we're all the same family here. I'm in both shows, so it's like, why make shit more complicated?
Fuck Inquiries of Our Reality. That show sucks.
Well, shit, I agree, actually.
We're having a civil war.
Inquiries is ass.
Do you want to be Captain America or do you want to be Iron Man?
I want to take the left field. I want to be Thor.
Okay.
I feel like the powers are just all around better, like, because you get the electricity, you get being a god, you get to go to like other worlds, you get to fight frost giants and shit. Like, Captain America's cool, don't get me wrong, but it's like, you know, you're just a World War II soldier that's a super soldier, which is cool kind of in its own right. Iron Man, you're just a rich guy who happens to be really intelligent, so best bet, I'm going to go left field and go with the other Avenger and go with Thor with that one.
You just want to be fucking Chris Hemsworth, but...
I want to be Thor himself and be able to transverse realities and galaxies. Like, that sounds amazing.
You want Chris Hemsworth to be your big bad boo daddy?
Well, how would I be my own daddy, though? Unless Chris Hemsworth would then become Odin and just move it all up, and, you know, Anthony Hopkins is just out of here.
We've gone too far down this rabbit hole. It's like inceptioning in on itself.
Too many questions involved with this.
Everybody about being guests on the show.
So, this podcast, as everybody knows, has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences and research on the show. That said, if anyone would like to be a guest on the show, or if you guys have an encounter or experience you would like to share on the show, or possibly have me investigate, you guys can always email us at bizarreencounters@outlook.com, or you guys can call or text the hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And in addition to all those changes, of course, the other thing is that I'm getting rid of the OMM Encounter Reports email and not having so many fucking emails. Figured everything would be easier if you guys can just consolidate and just, if you guys want to get a hold of us, one email, bizarreencounters@outlook.com. Be a guest, report your encounters, whatever the fuck you want to do. One email.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
And on that note, if you guys want to submit questions for the now YouTube, most of the time, exclusive mini show.
99.9% of the time.
Yeah. So you guys can do that. And again, it can be a clip. It can be an article. It can be just a question. It can be something totally, you know, left field, not paranormal related. Anything you want to ask us or have us inquire about, just submit those questions and we will do it.
What is your favorite sock texture? We're going to get some weird shit like that one day. Like,
it'd probably be what, like, full of cum or something like that?
I'm just going to go with soft. I wasn't going to go that far.
I figured you were going like somewhere weird with it.
No, I didn't want to be weird with it. I'm thinking like winter time, you know, like nice fuzzy socks, like, you know, those really, really furry ones, or do you like the ones that are made out of wool where they're a little bit itchy, but they're super warm? Like, you just always go into the bad spot because you're the big bad boo daddy, I guess. You know, it's just part of the name.
Bizarre Encounters After Dark.
And if you enjoy the show and think we deserve it, please leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. Your continued support is what makes the show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you, guys.
And as always, all the shit we've mentioned is in the link tree in the show descriptions. All right, guys. So as y'all probably know from clicking on this episode, we are going to do another Cryptid Grab Bag episode today. These are kind of fun to do for me and Shane. We get to talk about some stuff that, you know, might not be a big enough encounter to have a whole episode on, but are still like fun little cryptids to talk about. So, Shane, unless you got anything, I will jump into our first grab bag selection tonight.
I felt like we were a lot deeper than 3 of these in. Like, I feel like we've done like at least 5 of these. Like, I just had to go back and double check. I'm like, damn, we've only done 3 of these? Like,
yeah, but I guess it would be like 15 or 20 cryptids we've done, you know?
Maybe that's why it feels like so much. I mean, and our like live presentation was kind of like a grab bag, but not an official grab bag, so...
And also, if you guys hadn't listened to that episode, bonus episode we dropped a few weeks ago, check that one out.
Just skip over the part where we talk about what we end up talking about today, because it's going to be different, because we're not live. It doesn't feel so weird because we're not sitting in front of people staring at us. So,
or you can just listen to it twice. But
that works
anyway, so the first cryptid we're going to talk about tonight is the Mongolian Death Worm.
Damn, I didn't wear the right shirt today. I have a Mongolian Death Worm shirt that I wear all the time that Joe made, and I love it. And Mongolian Death Worms are very interesting, but I do have one right here.
That is definitely a Mongolian Death Worm.
And I do have one in a jar. It's my pet Mongolian Death Worm. Let me see if I can find it. Really interesting radio, everybody. But there you go. Mongolian Death Worm in a jar.
Yeah, I don't think it's real.
It's definitely real. It's my pet. I feed it little Mothman figures.
You got some just cryptid on cryptid cannibalism going on over there. But
wouldn't that be what would happen anyways, I would assume? Like, if there was a big brawl of all of these things, they would just resort into a bunch of, like, cannibalism. That's what I would assume.
Probably.
But is it cannibalism though? Because if they're eating each other but they're not the same species, then that's just being a predator. That's not even cannibalism.
Yeah, good to go. All right.
Unless you got some Mothman on Mothman crime.
Then that would be cannibalism.
That would be cannibalism.
Anyway, without further ado, so according to legend, the Mongolian Death Worm is a large worm-like creature. No shit, right?
Who would have known?
The Gobi Desert. And just a few little facts about the Gobi Desert. It is the 6th largest desert in the world, and it measures approximately 1,000 miles by 500 miles. And it is considered a cold desert, which means that like the temperatures fluctuate wildly. It can get down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter and over 113 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer.
I got a cool additional detail to add to this, actually. For anybody that knows who Pat Spain is from Beastmaster, I had him on Inquiries a long time ago, and we were talking about the Mongolian Death Worm, because this is one that he went there, he researched into, he was trying to like discover this thing. And just an additional fun fact, there are some areas of the Gobi Desert that have not been explored in so long that Pat Spain actually came across a dinosaur nest with eggs still in it. And he ended up giving that to the government of that country, and he got into this whole thing that he said he's pretty sure that Nicolas Cage ended up buying one of those eggs. But he said that this desert is so vast and there's so many regions that people haven't been in for so long that you can literally stumble upon a nest with dinosaur eggs still in it. Like, that's fucking crazy to think about.
And that totally seems like something Nicolas Cage would do.
Right? But, I mean, can you just imagine just you're fucking trying to find the Mongolian Death Worm? And I mean, that's just as fascinating as if you actually found the Mongolian Death Worm. Like, holy shit, a fucking dinosaur nest.
Finding dinosaur eggs might be cooler, actually.
I mean, until you get a Jurassic Park type situation going, like, you know, you got to warm the egg up a little bit, and it hasn't been warmed in so long. It's been in like a cryogenic state, and all it takes is that you touch it with your hands, and then a fucking raptor pops out, and you're just like, oh, fuck, Jurassic Park. God damn it.
Hey, well, now that's Nicolas Cage's problem.
Yeah, he would love it, bro. He'd just keep it confined in his house, and he'd be like, this is my raptor.
All right.
Who's the crazy one now?
Still Nicolas Cage.
Always Nicolas Cage.
All right. So there's really very little physical evidence to support the existence of these Mongolian death worms. But they're often described as being red in color, and they range anywhere from 2 feet to 5 feet long. They're also said to be capable of spitting venom, and some reports even say that they can emit like a dangerous electrical charge, kind of similar to an electric eel. And they're said to live and travel underground, which kind of like creates ripples or waves on the surface of the sand as they move.
And also a cool fun fact, the Mongolian government actually acknowledges and believes that there is the possibility of these things existing. Like, it's not like it's a cryptid, obviously, but like the government is like open to the possibility of this thing existing, which is fascinating, I think, because most stuff in the US, it's like, nope, doesn't exist. No Sasquatch here.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll kind of talk about this more toward the end when we're concluding and wrapping up. But yeah, I think this is one that, like you said, yeah, it's a cryptid, but this is like totally believable. You know, this isn't like Mothman, or not that, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, doesn't take a whole lot of thinking outside the box to think something like this could exist.
Pat Spain had some pretty interesting theories and stuff on it. If we don't end up covering it, I'll end up bringing them back into the fold, but just a different way of thinking about this one. But yeah, I definitely think it's just the most possibility, even if it isn't necessarily exactly what people think it is. I still think that there's definitely something there that people aren't sure about.
Yeah, I think we'll probably hit on some of that, but I've got some kind of thoughts on it myself, so maybe we'll circle back around to that in a minute.
Actually, pretty cool fun fact. Maybe we can dig through this at some point, but Pat Spain was actually nice enough to send me a copy of each of his books signed, and one of them is the Mongolian Death Worm one, so maybe I can get some additional details at some point, and we can dive back into the Mongolian Death Worm.
Jump back, Funky Cat. Let's do it.
Yo.
All right, so the Mongolian Death Worm was popularized through an American paleontologist named Roy Chapman Andrews. And in 1926, he published a book called On the Trail of Ancient Man. And in this book, Andrews talks about like secondhand reports of the creature. And he says that, quote, "None of those present had ever seen the creature, but they all firmly believed in its existence and described it minutely. But it should kind of also be noted that Andrews allegedly did not actually believe in the existence of this creature. And this kind of reminds me of a few months ago. Remember when we did our episode on like the Mokele Bembe and other living dinosaurs? There's a lot of similarities between that and the Mongolian Death Worm, I think. Because if you remember, the guy who kind of popularized the Mokele Bembe originally in like the 20s, it was kind of the same type situation. Like he wrote about it in a book, but he didn't actually believe this thing existed. He thought it was just kind of legend and folklore.
And it ended up being, of course, like misidentification, but was he the one that popularized that idea with the black rhino, or was it like the next person that started diving into it?
I think that happened later, but like the first guy who actually talked about it in like 100 years ago, like I said, it was kind of the same situation. He was like an explorer and just kind of recounted these secondhand stories that the locals had.
I mean, maybe there's still a possibility that something like it existed at some point, and then, I don't know, like, assumably, like, a lot of these animals end up, depending on how long, like, the group has been there, you know, there's going to be changes that the animal has. So, like, maybe at one point, the animal looked more monster-like, and then that slow transition of it kind of adapting over time, you know, and then people are like, oh yeah, that's a rhino. But when it first started off, it did look different than like what we're looking at as a present day rhino. But like the tribe was around as it was like adapting to the environment. So they kind of like focally shifted with it, if that makes sense.
I'm going to save some of my thoughts and theories for just a minute when we get down to like miscellaneous and theories, because I got some stuff to add. But I think I kind of agree with a lot of that. So in the early 1990s, there was a Czech cryptozoologist and author, and his name was Ivan, I believe it would be Makerle. And he led like multiple expeditions to search for these Mongolian death worms. And he used techniques like shock waves and explosions and what he called rhythmic thumping, which there's no way to make that sound not sexual. And so all this was basically like just pounding on the sand to like create vibrations and shock waves to try to lure these creatures up to the surface.
I almost feel like that would push them away from the area more than it would like push them up to the surface.
Well, he didn't find any, so maybe you're right. But he also theorized that the creatures lived near sources of water, and they only emerged after like heavy rainfalls. And so later in 2005, there was a researcher for the Center for Fortean Zoology, and his name was Richard Freeman, and he led another expedition to find the Mongolian death worms. But ultimately, he wasn't able to find any evidence to prove their existence either. But throughout the years, there's been several reports of these things like attacking or even killing humans, hence the name. And in the 1960s, supposedly there was an entire herd of camels that was like allegedly killed by this large worm that like suddenly appeared from below the surface of the sand. There's this other encounter that I thought was kind of interesting, where a young boy was killed by supposedly a large worm that was hiding in his toy box. And when the parents attempted to like remove this worm from the toy box, it killed them as well.
That may have been a snake.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Hold on tight, guys. We're going to take a quick commercial break. But
if you guys want to stay up to date with the show, follow Bizarre Encounters on Instagram and Facebook, and Open Minds Media on YouTube, Telegram, and the TikToks.
Now feel free to fast forward through these commercials so we can get back into the show. And now back to the show.
So one last quick encounter. There was a local person who was like at the time working as an interpreter for like an expedition. And he allegedly recalled, quote, an incident from his childhood when a visiting geologist was killed instantly by a huge fat worm that emerged from the ground. So kind of jumping into what you said, it's been theorized that like misidentification of known species could be responsible for a lot of these death worm reports. And in 1983, locals were shown a live Carter sand boa, which you know more about reptiles than I do, so you might could speak on that a little bit. But they claimed that it was the same creature as the Mongolian Death Worm, which again is very similar to the Mokele Bembe stuff, where they showed them a picture of a rhinoceros and they're like, yeah, that's it. So one last little bit here before we close out. So Richard Freeman, who was the leader of that 2005 expedition, he theorized that the creature was most likely, quote, an unknown species of worm lizard. And there was a French cryptozoologist named Michael Raynal, and he suggested that it could be, quote, some kind of burrowing, serpent or cobra. So it seems to me that, like you said, the most likely scenario is, yeah, there could have been some like big worm type creature that used to exist. And throughout the years, you know, that kind of got twisted and combined with these sand boas or whatever. And, you know, the mythology game of telephone just endures to today. But we're talking about basically snakes at this point.
I mean, one theory that Pat Spain threw on, which I thought was pretty interesting, was he basically said he walked around and he ended up talking to a bunch of like Mongolian people and stuff. And he said that they had this thing where obviously they were like nomadic tribes for like a very long time. So he said that within their like folklore, they kind of got to this idea where it was like, all right, this thing's dangerous. We're just going to create a story about it to keep people away from it. And he said that those stories, again, like you said, kind of became telephone, where it came from like, you know, there's a dead camel with a snake next to it. And then it turned into like, oh, that snake must have killed that camel and it must have killed the person that was riding the camel. So then it must spit some kind of acid and all this kind of shit. And he got into this other explanation that was basically saying he like showed him this, what are they called? Some type of spider that you said was kind of like a camel spider. And he was like, oh, this thing. And he said they'll vibrate to a point where they'll make like they'll give like knock you unconscious. And they like created this like giant story off of like this thing that he knew exactly what it was. So he kind of got that like idea that from the people and becoming the folklore and being a nomadic tribe, rather than like spending the time to be like, all right, let's figure out this animal. It's more like, that's dangerous. Don't touch it. We're going to stay away from that. And then from there, it's just all these stories just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And he said that this is like a common thing if you kind of dive into like Mongolian folklore as a whole, or even most nomadic tribes, because they don't spend enough time like in one specific area to really like learn the animal. So they just go, that's dangerous. And then they just start creating all these stories as they travel. And, you know, it just keeps, it's just an avalanche from there, essentially. Snowballs.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense to me. And, you know, without hearing all those stories, like that's kind of a similar conclusion that I came to is, yeah, this is probably based on something real, but just confabulated and, you know, blown way out of proportion throughout the years. So that's kind of where I fall on it as well.
I mean, my assumption is that either one, yeah, it's some type of like burrowing snake, which obviously is a pretty common thing. There's a lot of different fucking sand boas, just different animals that are burrowing snakes. And then on the other side, the guy that mentioned like the worm lizard, I mean, there are a handful of lizards that actually like don't have legs. And from visually looking at it, you would assume that it's a snake, but they obviously function different and eat insects and stuff eat insects rather than like rodents and stuff like that. But that would be my guess on what they are. That's kind of where like Pat Spain got to, is he thinks that it's some type of like red fucking like sand snake. And basically all these different stories got created from it, basically off of like, essentially like if something dies in the desert, things come for food. And he thinks that this is one of those animals that comes for the food that comes with like an animal being dead. Like if it's a snake and, you know, other rodents come and they start eating this thing, then it's going to sit there and it's going to try to collect the food, where it kind of ends up being like the same concept as like the reason why a corn snake is called a corn snake is because they thought they were eating the corn, but they were actually eating the rodents around the corn. And the reason why a milk snake is called a milk snake isn't because it eats milk or drinks milk like they thought it was. It was because, again, it was eating the rodents that were inside the barn that were around the cows and stuff. So it's like, you know, they make an assumption that it's eating that particular thing, but that's not it. It's eating what that thing attracts. But
yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. So I'm kind of with you on that.
The Mongolian eating decaying stuff worm. That's probably a little bit more of an accurate name.
Off the tongue.
It's just, yeah, it doesn't roll off the tongue. It's not as aesthetically pleasing.
All right, you want
the Mongolian scavenger worm. There you go.
There you go.
That's a little bit better.
All right, y'all, we got to take a break and pay some bills.
But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. It's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts or video versions of the show, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits, with 7-day free trials available.
And now, back to the show. All right, Shayn, why don't you tell our listeners about the next cryptid we're going to talk about tonight?
So, this one is one that we had covered a really, really, really long time ago on the show, but it's one of those ones that we covered it back when Ghost was the original, was a co-host on the show. So I want to kind of bring it back, get some of Orin's thoughts and ideas on this one, and also kind of making another reference to it. One of the first encounter reports that we taken in, I don't know if you remember this one that I got from TikTok, where somebody sent it to me, where they were talking about this like flying ape type encounter.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I threw the idea about like the Ahul. Like, this is part of the reason why I kind of came to that conclusion, is because of this cryptid. But getting into it, we're going to be diving into Batsquatch. And this is one that there's not a lot of information on it. There's basically like 2 fucking pictures and a lot of people just talking, but not anything like solid and like evident. But the area that it's in definitely kind of brings in some other validity to it, but we'll dive into that. So the Batsquatch is a flying cryptid that was allegedly seen near Mount St. Helen in the 1980s. Its origin was supposedly at Mount St. Helens eruption. It resembles a flying primate similar to the Ahul or the orang-bati of southern Asia. And its name is derived from the words bat and squatch, obviously, Batsquatch. This creature was said to have yellow eyes, a dog-like muzzle, blue fur, sharp teeth, bird-like feet, leathery bat-like wings, and wingspan up to 50 feet. In addition, Batsquatch is said to be 9 feet tall and has the ability to affect car engines, which, again, kind of brings in some other weirdness to this whole thing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm sure you'll kind of have some theories as we kind of get into this, because it seems kind of side tangent of some other stuff we've kind of talked about. But the first witness allegedly took photos of the creature, and its existence is extremely questioned, considering the 2 photographs which have now been proven unedited, which also is kind of interesting. And you'll kind of get where I'm getting to as we kind of get a little bit farther in this one. But as far as sightings go, the first sighting was on April 19th, 1994. Weirdly enough, 5 days after I was born. Woohoo. At 9:30 a.m. 18-year-old Brian Canfield was driving a truck near Buckley, Washington, in the foothills of Mount Rainier. Canfield's truck came to a sudden and abrupt stop as a bizarre and terrifying creature appeared no more than 30 feet in front of him. The creature was described as 9 feet tall with bluish fur. It had a wolf-like face, yellow eyes, tufted ears, and a large mouth filled with sharp white teeth. Its feet were described as bird-like, and on its back were 2 wings attached at the shoulder. After an undetermined length of time, the creature unfolded its wings and took off with a sudden force that Canfield's truck shook with the disturbance of air. The truck started again as abruptly as it stopped, and Brian Canfield drove home. Canfield later returned to the site of the encounter with his mother and neighbor in hopes of finding some type of physical evidence of the encounter, but none, unfortunately, was found. Local reporter C.R. Roberts of the Tacoma News Tribune interviewed Canfield and was convinced of his sincerity. He published an 800-word article based on the interview on April 24th, 1994. So I'll let you kind of throw some thoughts in on that one, because I'm sure you already got some thoughts on the whole truck thing.
Well, yeah, like you said, this one kind of hits a lot of points that we talk about a lot. Of course, there's the dying car batteries. Just the fact that it was seen near Mount Rainier, which of course is, the Kenneth Arnold sighting, just an area associated with a lot of high strangeness.
This kind of takes on more of like a UFO type of feel to me than it does like a squatchy kind of feel to me.
Well, something that I thought was kind of interesting is in the first paragraph, how you talked about how it was allegedly seen after like the Mount St. Helens eruption, which kind of, we talk a lot about ultra-terrestrials and elementals and things of that nature. What if this was something that was like living in the earth and was kind of ejected when the volcano blew? I think there's just a lot to unpack with this one.
Or you get into the whole like UFOs possibly having secret bases inside volcanoes and not necessarily like going into the magma, but rather like kind of using the tunnels and stuff that's above the magma. I mean, UFO taking off because the tunnels are starting to fill back in with magma. It's like, oh shit, pew!
And something else, this thing is huge, like a 50-foot wingspan. Like that's massive. You know, that's 5 basketball hoops. So, I mean, we talk about like the Mothman sightings and stuff. This thing is like way bigger than Mothman was reported as being. So, I mean, I think something that big, it makes more sense that it came out of the earth than it was just, you know, some cryptid that was flying around in the woods, you know?
And I mean, just to kind of throw in another kind of weird aspect to this too, I'm sure you're familiar with the whole like Ape Canyon encounter, right? So Ape Canyon was also Mount St. Helens. So it's like people already had that idea of like ape creatures on this mountain. So I kind of wonder if like part of the description of calling it like a Batsquatch came from the idea that there was already the indentation of there being like ape man encounters that were already happening on this mountain. And then they just kind of threw in like a UFO type encounter and they're like Squatch just because they already had the whole ape idea in their head.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of goes back to what we talk about how, you know, Dogman encounters historically could have been more reported as like Sasquatch encounters. Like people are going to just go to like the most common thing in their mind with these kind of weird encounters. So yeah, if you see this weird creature thing that you have no idea what it is, people have more of a framework, no pun intended, for Sasquatch than they do whatever this thing was, you know?
And I mean, even the main thing where nobody's been able to get like photographic evidence of this, like see it really, like get like, maybe besides this first sighting, like nobody's really been able to like see this thing with like the naked eye, as they say, but they get these like weird zooming and like pictures and stuff like that. I mean, that seems pretty reminiscent of like UFO to me, where maybe like the original sighting, that was it. That was all it was the dude in the truck, and that was it. And then all these other included ones that are kind of getting thrown together was because somebody already described this Batsquatch creature, and people again are taking UFO things and saying that, oh, it must be this Batsquatch thing because it's the only thing that there's reference to that flies on in this area. Because again, not being able to be seen in the pictures, you brought up the whole thing with like you know, it coming out when the eruption, everything like that happens, and again, not being able to see it with the naked eye, like all that shit. It just seems very UFO, and like there's two different things that are mixed together in here, because the first encounter obviously is very different than like the other ones that people are describing, and the fact that it's like an unedited picture and they've proven it unedited, and if you look at it, it kind of looks like a streak with somewhat of like a outline to it. Like it again kind of just has like a UFO feel to it to me, more so than it does like any type of flying, you know, bat like ape man.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something more than just a standard cryptid going on here.
And I mean, even kind of connecting partially into like the whole Mothman idea too. They talk about the whole, I think you kind of started bringing this up a little bit, but the whole idea between like when there's a disturbance that happens in the area, you know, that's going to possibly open up some energy portals, shit like that. So, I mean, obviously with like the Mothman thing, with time not necessarily being linear, maybe that kind of plays a role where like the Silver Bridge collapse, you know, this thing shows up because there was some type of like shift or like something that kind of like opened. So this thing, I don't know if there were deaths in that Mount St. Helens eruption, how many there may have been, people got hurt, like whatever, but maybe it kind of plays into the flying humanoid showing up around an event type of feel.
Yeah, definitely. Like a harbinger of doom type situation.
Exactly, because there's a disturbance or something open. I mean, specifically with like the volcano too. I mean, there's definitely a lot of chemical reactions going on with that. So who knows, like, for a microscopic moment, like what that might potentially be able to open. Because I mean, anybody that's like studied volcanoes and shit, I mean, I don't know, like, I don't know if they dive into like that aspect of it, but like theoretically, I feel like if there was going to be like a portal or something, it would have to be one of those like exact perfect thing happens at the exact time that it's supposed to, and then something just slides through and that's it. So I don't expect that it's going to be something that you can like, all right, this is exactly where this is going to happen at. We need to make sure we put markers there. We need to make sure that, you know, the chemical changes or whatever happening in this area, like, unless you had a frame of reference to like maybe possibly look for that, it's like, it's an eruption. Nobody's going to be looking for like this exact weird thing happened to happen in this exact area.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, when the earth is doing with these weird things and energy is being expelled, that seems like a really high likelihood of, you know, other strange things that we don't know taking place.
Or to go on a more biblical spin, you know, if America is actually, or North America is actually the old world, maybe this thing was one of the Nephilim that was hiding, that was under the surface. It was inside of the mountain on the other side. Everybody thinks it's Appalachia. Maybe it's Mount St. Helen, and this thing was, from the description of it, it was a Nephilim.
I like that idea.
It's a Nephilim. It's always a Nephilim. If it's a weird creature that has a chimera type thing going on, Nephilim. Just slap a label on it.
Swamp
Fuck
gas
it.
and Nephilims.
Swamp gas and Nephilims.
That's what we should call the show.
Swamp gas and Nephilims? I love it. No, swamp gas, owls, balloons, and Nephilim.
And Sandhill Cranes.
And Sandhill Cranes. That's a really long working title. I'll have to like abbreviate that. Would the abbreviation be just a bunch of random letters? I mean, that might work.
Yeah, I don't think that would roll off the tongue.
I mean, random letters don't have context until you start saying them over and over again, and then they start sounding like they are something. So I mean, you got to start somewhere. Hold on tight, guys. We'll be back with that bizarre stuff you crave. But
if you would like to rock some gear for your favorite podcast or creature,
hop on over to the Open Minds Media store on Etsy and Printify for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. The most recent design available is the SQUATCH Country Fear and Loathing parody design, with Sasquatch as Hunter S. Thompson and Mothman as Dr. Gonzo, with artwork by Chris Holm of the Conspiracy Theory podcast. And we are back with the high strangeness. Let's get back into it. So diving into the second one, a possible second sighting was reported in 2009 near Mount Shasta in California. Several hikers witnessed a huge creature with leathery wings, spanning about 50 feet, fly out of a crevice in the mountain. At first, an eyewitness described the creature as having a head similar to a pterodactyl. However, upon reconsideration, the witness claimed it was more akin to a flying fox bat. And, I mean, do what you want with that one. That's still like, oh yeah, flying fox bat. Nothing weird to see here.
No, I think this one's kind of fun too, because, Mount Shasta is, kind of known for high strangeness and weird activity. And a lot of people think there could be like a portal there in Mount Shasta. And the fact that this thing came out of a crevice in the mountain, and was first reported as, looking similar to a pterodactyl. I'm kind of digging like more Hollow Earth type vibes on this one. I think that's my favorite pet theory on this one.
Or it's like a time slip area, possibly, there's a time slip where something came from the future and that was that UFO looking thing. And then the time slip from the past. And that's why you get the pterodactyl looking thing. And then maybe there's not a second encounter
action going on.
Exactly. And maybe like time lines correct themselves, so it's like this thing will fly out. Everybody's like, oh shit, there's a pterodactyl thing. And then it just goes boop and disappears. And the timeline corrects itself and puts it back into place. That's always a weird concept to think about, is like, would a timeline try to correct themselves, or is that simply like a sci-fi concept? Because like if something's missing from the other timeline, it's almost like you ripped a piece out of that fabric of that timeline. So it's like, would it naturally be attracted back like a magnetic force, or would it just be a ripped fragment of that timeline that, could possibly start unraveling unless you put that piece back yourself?
Well, in the documentary Back to the Future, I think we found out as long as you don't literally fuck your mother, you're good to go. So,
and also don't step on a bee. But at the same time, though, they say you can't go in the past and you can't step on a bug because otherwise it'll alter the timeline in the future. But did that already happen? If it's the past, that the timeline that you exist in is the reason that it exists now is because you went back in the past and you did what you did. So you could theoretically do whatever you want in the past because it's already happened in your timeline because you exist in this timeline.
Yeah. Yep. That's all I got. Marty, put the plutonium in the flux capacitor.
Got to reach, 77 miles an hour? 88 miles an hour. And diving into the last one, on June 2011, Phoenix, who uses a fake name, was in his yard walking his dog. He went to pick up his dog and saw something in the sky. He said the following: "I saw something flying in the sky. It had bat wings, blue fur, and had a face similar to eyes glowing red. It was about 9 feet tall, at least. After I watched it, just flew away." On April 14th, 2014, at Archbishop Hoban High School in Akron, Ohio, a second period Spanish class spotted a giant black mass zip by a flying window off of the classroom at incredible speed. The class claims it was about 9 feet tall with 20 to 30 foot wingspan. And it seems like none of these are confined in one specific area, which, I don't know, like maybe that brings some more validity into the whole like possible like time slip scenario. Or on the other side, I mean, there's a lot of undiscovered shit. And if you have an ape that has wings, I mean, not necessarily saying it's like a fucking Batsquatch or nothing like that, but if you had some type of like flying primate, like how easy would these things have to hide. And honestly, like, how many people really fucking look up? Like, just UFOs in general. Like, people that look up have sightings all the time, and then people that don't are like, oh, there's no fucking UFOs. What are you talking about? It's because you don't look up. Most people really don't look up.
Yeah, and the thing I thought was interesting about this last one is how he points out the sighting in Akron, Ohio. Akron, not super duper far from Point Pleasant. So that's kind of interesting.
Weird. That is a good catch. I didn't even notice that one at first. The other thing that I thought was fascinating is that either one, it's because the idea is already in people's minds, or two, it's because they're actually seeing something of this exact description. But everybody says this like bluish fur, about 9 feet tall. Like, no matter how verse these encounter sightings are, and as far as like different regions and stuff, like, weirdly enough, they're all describing the same thing, it appears.
Yeah, and the blue fur is kind of an interesting detail. Like, normally when we talk about these things, apart from like glowing red or yellow eyes, they all have like very muted color schemes. They're all black or gray or brown or, you know, sometimes white. But yeah, I think the blue fur is an interesting detail that, in my opinion, kind of gives some validity to this, that, you know, multiple people have reported this same kind of odd detail. And
even on the other side, it's like, I almost feel like things that fly can almost be as difficult to find as things in the ocean, for the aspect of like, we can't fly. So if this thing takes the fuck off, like, how are you going to chase it? You're going to have a helicopter like ready and present, and you're just going to hop on that bitch and just start taking off after this thing. Like, there's no way of chasing this thing down. Even if you're like up on a mountainside and you see this thing like fly off, like, there's no way of like following this thing to see what it is, where it goes. Like, if you have a flying species of something, like, I feel like that's one of like the hardest things to fucking like catch and say like, this is exactly what it is. Especially if, again, you kind of bring in like an intelligence factor to this thing. Like, if it is ape-like, that it knows to avoid, it's not just like a bird that's just going to sit there and think that it's hidden if it's sitting still, you know. Like, if it's something that's primate intelligent, then, you know, if it hears you coming around the fucking ridge, this thing's going to take off, and you're never even going to know it was there in the first place. And it may have like a little hidey hole that's literally like, you know, you can't get to it climbing unless you try to climb down to it. But, you know, it could be on the edge of a cliff and there's just a fucking hole right there, and it's like 10 feet down. You can't get into that, but that could literally be this thing's fucking nest for all you know. And again, without seeing this thing fly out, how many times would you walk past that ridge and never know that that hole's there?
I think what you mean to say is, where the Batsquatch is going, it doesn't need roads.
Exactly, it does not. Dude, I wish there was more Batsquatch sightings, because I kind of feel like this is, again, going into like the misidentification concept that we're always talking about. Like, all these flying humanoids, there's such a vast description to these things. Like, just go on Phantoms and Monsters and like read all the shit that Lon does on this stuff. Like, there's such a wide variety of descriptions for this shit that it's like, are they all the same thing? Are they different colorations of the same thing? Or are all these flying humanoid things all completely different things? I mean, there's clearly something going on with the phenomenon, because like a flying humanoid is pretty, like, even in a silhouette, it's pretty fucking obvious what it is. But on the other side, you kind of got to get into the possibility of, again, like I say all the time, like government intervention. Like, you're trying to create like a fucking biosuit or something. You know, you don't want to be flying around looking like a goddamn Power Ranger. If you fucking cover it up, making it look like this fucking monster, you're just going to scare people away in the process. So 2 birds, 1 stone, right? And if anybody sees it, it's not a biosuit, it's a fucking flying ape. Like, nobody's going to believe you. Like,
no, I think, like you said, this is one of those situations where there could be more than one thing going on at the same time. I think this Batsquatch one's kind of fun. You know, a lot of these kind of flying humanoid creature reports, the details are not as specific as in this one. But like we said just a few moments ago, I mean, there's a really specific set of traits that are attributed to this thing: size, color, you know, behavior. So, kind of where I land on this one, I think, yeah, there's probably something to it. There's enough similarities in the multiple stories to give validity, and I kind of like the you know, creature coming out of the earth, ultra terrestrial, hollow earth, whatever you want to call it, angle. That's what I'm going with this one.
Hey, and another side note, though, kind of getting into another possibly more scientific explanation, alongside the winged primate theory, another accepted theory is that the creatures are a new species of fruit bat, despite reports depicting the animals as carnivorous, and assuming to be at fault for the disappearance of many farm animals in the region. So, again, kind of getting into the whole, like, disappearing thing with UFOs. I mean, maybe. I mean, if animals are disappearing, but I mean, at least like within scientific mind, they are acknowledging the possibility of maybe at least like a winged primate or a fruit bat. But I mean, I'm assuming that there has been no discovery of any type of like winged primate, not even stuff that doesn't exist anymore. Like I've never come across anything like that. So, I mean, winged primate to be a possible theory is kind of out there, I guess, as a whole anyways. like I don't think there's ever been in any fossil record, any type of remote anything to like a flying fucking primate.
That's why it's a chimera. It's a Nephilim. We figured it out.
Nephilim. It's always fucking Nephilim.
Yeah, we figured it out like 20 minutes ago. We've just been wasting time.
Same with the next one. The next one's probably a Nephilim too.
Probably. All right, guys, we got to take another break. We'll be right back. And now we're getting back to the bizarre. All right, guys. So our third and final cryptid for tonight is going to be the Snallygaster. And in the folklore of Western Maryland, the Snallygaster is a large, like half bird, half reptile type creature. It's said to be covered with large scales and have a wingspan of approximately 25 feet, so half of a Batsquatch. It's also
I want to see these two fight: Batsquatch versus a Snallygaster.
My money's on the Batsquatch. But
the Snallygaster has agility because it's smaller.
We'll it has sharp claws, a metallic beak, and a tail resembling like a lizard's tail. And in some reports, it's even said to have like octopus-like tentacles and like this big eye in the center of its forehead. So kind of strange details there. The legend of the Snallygaster dates back to at least the 1700s, and it came from like early German immigrants to the area. And they reported being terrorized by a creature that they called the Schnellergeist, which means quick ghost or quick spirit in German. So just roll that around in your mouth a little bit. Schnellergeist.
Schnellergeist. Geist.
Yeah, that one's fun.
Geist is just a fun word anyways.
So
what does polter mean then? Is that, I'm assuming that's a German word if you take poltergeist, and geist is obviously spirit. So like, what does the polter
ghost,
part mean in poltergeist?
We'll have to see.
I'm curious.
You can do some Googling while I'm going on with the notes, and we'll update the listeners.
I shall.
We're doing a geography and spelling bee hour right now. So anyway, this creature was considered a bad omen, and it was frequently blamed for deaths and child disappearances, which I thought that was kind of interesting. And it was believed that like signs and hexes, such as 7-pointed stars, could repel the Snallygaster. So did you get confirmation on poltergeist yet?
Yes, it means to make sound or rumble.
So it's a rumble ghost.
Rumble ghost, or make a sound ghost. I like rumble ghost.
Rumble ghost actually sounds like way cooler than poltergeist.
It does actually. But I mean, you sound like you're fancy because you're using poltergeist, and it's not an English word. Because it sounds very English if you break it down, because it's like a lot of our words that it's like butterfly. Like we just combine words and we're just like, yep, that's it. That makes sense. So we got to change them to another language so at least they sound better. Yeah, it sounds exotic and fancy that way. And then you got to explain it, and then you sound even smarter when you got to explain the root of the word. See? So the first published report of the Snallygaster appeared in the February 12th, 1909 edition of the Middletown Valley Register newspaper. And this article claimed that a large creature had swooped down out of the sky and like grabbed this guy and carried him off and sucked his blood. And following this initial article, a lot of other people reported seeing similar creatures. And there's this man named George Jacobs, and he claimed that he encountered one of these creatures while he was hunting. And allegedly, he shot at the creature, but his bullets like ricocheted off of its scales. And in another kind of bizarre encounter, see what I did there? Bizarre encounters. A man who was working at a brick kiln claimed that the creature swooped down and took a drink out of a large tub of water. And allegedly, the creature spoke aloud and said, quote, "My, I'm dry. I haven't had a good drink since I was killed at the Battle of Chickamauga," which this guy might have just been on drugs or something. Like, that one's pretty trippy. What year was this?
1909.
1909. Okay, so it wasn't like that prominent of there being something. Because if it was like 1800s, you know, maybe it was like air god in like the rye or something like that. Like, but that's like that middle way where it's just like people weren't really, there wasn't really a problem yet. And at least from drinking, you're like, I've never fucking seen nothing drinking, so I don't know where people come up with that explanation.
Unless they're on like absinthe or something.
But I mean,
back when absinthe was good, probably.
I mean, even with that though, I mean, you start diving into like absinthe, and it was what was it? It was like wormwood or something like that was like the active ingredient.
Yeah.
So people kind of got like this whole like misconception that it like makes you hallucinate, when really what it would do is make you have like really, really vivid dreams. So even like within absinthe, it's like absinthe isn't like the little green fairy that everybody thinks it was. It was just the added thing that was in it would give you like really vivid fucking dreams to the point where people were like, I'm actually seeing this and hallucinating when they wake up the next day. But there was never actually like a solid hallucination factor to original absinthe either.
And if Aaron Rodgers was alive back in the olden times, I bet he would have loved him some wormwood.
Dude, I just want to go back in time and try a little bit of like honest, good absinthe. And on the other side, it's like opium. You know, you fucking see these like old things with like the opium dens, and people are like writing fucking like Alice in Wonderland and all these like crazy fucking books from like sitting in an opium den. And now it's like you associate that shit with like heroin. And it's like you can never see somebody just like sitting there doing heroin and then like writing a trippy ass fucking book. So like, how is the opium different? Like, what kind of fucking opium was that? I feel but that would be a whole fucking trip all on its own to go to like an old opium den and just like fucking get lost for hours and see Tweedledee and Tweedledum fucking shoving their fingers up each other's asses or whatever the hell they were seeing. I don't fucking know.
Okay. So, in the last Snallygaster encounter of the initial wave, the creature was said to have attacked a group of men who were working at a railroad station near Emmitsburg, Maryland. And the men allegedly like fought with this creature for over an hour before it finally just like flew away into the woods. And the Snallygaster at this point was not seen again for another 23 years. However, people in the community did report they found eggs, like these large bird-like eggs, that they speculated belonged to the creature.
Those are just man, bear, pig eggs.
Probably. That's just as likely.
It was man, bear, pig. It's always him.
Or a Batsquatch.
Or Batsquatch. It was Batsquatch eggs.
But in November of 1932, Snallygaster reports began again. And there's this man named Charles F. Maine, and he claimed that he had seen the creature near the Braddock Heights community in Frederick County, Maryland. And at this point, the Middletown Valley Register newspaper, once again started like reporting these sightings. And one report claimed that the creature had fallen into a 2,500-gallon vat of moonshine, and prohibition officers and like local law enforcement arrived, and they blew up the vat and the creature using over 500 pounds of dynamite. And it seems like we talk about things getting blown up by dynamite a lot on this show. I mean, we had the frog that got blown up. We got Jack Parsons. We got in the Integratron episode, I think somebody blew themselves up with dynamite. So this is like the fourth dynamite blowing up we've talked about.
Can we talk about how much of an overkill this is? That you had 2,500 gallons of moonshine, which is extremely flammable. So you already have an accelerant, and then they're like, I think we need about 500 pounds of dynamite on top of that. Like that is such a fucking overkill. That's how you take out like the whole fucking county. Like, holy shit. Can you imagine that explosion? That was just a bunch of good old boys wanting to watch an explosion in the woods. They weren't taking out a creature. They were like, let's just blow it up. Fuck it. Let's see what happens.
Here, hold my moonshine. But yeah, like dynamite could not have been that cheap in the 30s. I mean, that just seems like a horrible use of government resources.
Or knowing how corrupt things were back then, these people came up on a moonshine distillery and they had to have a reason to blow it up. But what actually happened was they just took all the moonshine.
We're going to get there. Keep that in mind.
And then just made it all disappear. It's like, oh, there's no fucking moonshine. We blew it up with 500 pounds of dynamite. What are you talking about?
So I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to kind of circle back around.
What moonshine? We blew it up with dynamite. There's no moonshine. I can't fucking see anymore.
So after this moonshine dynamite fiasco, locals speculated that this creature could have been the offspring of the original Snallygaster, and it could have hatched from one of the eggs that was allegedly found in 1909.
Going back to a good question, would a Batsquatch lay an egg or would it have live birth? Which side of the genetics would it take?
I think it would be funner if it laid eggs.
I think it lays eggs, but there's live birth inside of those eggs. So it gives live birth to an egg, and then the egg instantly cracks, and there's an baby.
So it's a xenomorph type situation.
Yeah, it's like a double out situation. You take the genetics of both sides.
I see. It's very scientific.
Very, very. And then the baby already knows how to fly, so it just goes right out of the egg, and that's it.
Like
That's the sound they make.
Devil.
Yep, that's the sound they make too. So the Jersey Devil was basically just a baby Batsquatch that made its way into somebody's orifice somehow.
Hey, you heard it here first, guys.
She must have sat on an egg in the woods and didn't realize it. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
That's what happened in some alternate reality where Marty McFly fucked his mom.
That's what happens with incest. An egg gets created, and that's why it's so fucked up.
So, according to local folklore, the Snallygaster's enemy is a creature known as the Dwayyo.
Dwayyo. Whoa.
The Dwayyo we've actually talked about a little bit in the past, and it's said to resemble a large black dog or wolf. So I think when we did kind of our like Dogman series episode, we touched on this a little bit. But it's said to have the ability to stand upright and walk on its hind legs, and it stands 6 to 9 feet tall. And the Dwayyo kind of stems from a similar creature from German folklore known as the Hexenwolf. These German names are just great. So the Hexenwolf means witch wolf. So you got the Schnellergeist and the witch wolf.
Schnell. That's like a fun word to say because it doesn't flow off the tongue, but it's like a fun sound to make, that hard S to an N. Schnell.
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 Yeah, Schneller.
Schnellergeist.
So, according to these legends, the Hexenwolf was a human being that had the ability to switch between human and wolf forms. So, I mean, it's basically like kind of skinwalker, werewolf type stuff.
It's a fucking werewolf.
Yeah. And
what's up with witches just turning into animals? You got like Layla Chusa, you got the witch wolf, like,
because it's super badass.
It is pretty badass. And then it goes back into that whole thing that I've mentioned a million times on the show. You start having these people that seem to be privy to occult knowledge, and it's like, are they really shape-shifting, or they have this ability, or do they know how to alter people's perception to see what they want them to see?
Well, they said that this creature was able to shapeshift through the use of a magical talisman or by making a deal with a demon or a sorcerer. So there is that.
I blame the magic talisman. It can alter people's perceptions.
That's just as good a theory as any. So do you have anything else before I jump back into some theories and conclusions about the Snallygaster?
I should probably hop in with anything I have to mention after theories and conclusions so I don't double back on anything.
Well, some of these are kind of fun. So the validity of these 1909 reports of the Snallygaster, the ones that appeared in like that Middleton Valley Register newspaper, they've kind of been drawn into question throughout the years, because a few weeks prior were reports of the Jersey Devil. And we talked about the Jersey Devil on our previous Cryptid Grab Bag episode, so check that out if you guys have not.
Also got the hat for the hockey team.
There you go.
New Jersey Devils.
It's been speculated that the newspaper's editor, who was a man named George C. Roderick, and a reporter named Ralph S. Wolf, fabricated these Snallygaster articles to try to like kind of drum up business for their own newspaper, because, you know, the Jersey Devil reports were like so profitable.
Roderick with his damn rhetoric.
Roderick. That's a fun one too.
Roderick with his rhetoric.
So this is kind of interesting, I thought. The man who reported the first Snallygaster sighting was a local author named Thomas Chalmers Harbaugh. And he was kind of locally famous for writing over 750 nickel novels, which are like, you know, like pulp dime store type.
It was comic books before
novels.
Comic books.
Yeah, pretty much. And interestingly, he was also best friends with George C. Roderick, who was the editor of the newspaper.
Damn it, Roderick.
Yep. So people have theorized that basically these two got together and fabricated this whole story to just like drum up business for the newspaper and the local community. But it's also kind of been theorized that the original Snallygaster legends were invented to intimidate freed slaves and to kind of keep them from running away. And it said that these legends were revived by moonshiners during Prohibition to keep government agents away from their stills, which kind of circles back to the dynamite magical fiasco.
I mean, with that one, though, it's kind of like, all right, you say that there's a creature in this area, and is it really going to keep the cops or anybody away? Because I feel like that's going to draw more people into the area. Because if you got, especially in the early 1900s, man, you got a bunch of fucking guys that, you know, can't legally drink because it's during Prohibition, all this kind of shit. You can fucking send them on a wild goose chase, bro. Everybody and their fucking brother is going to join that shit. You're like, there's a creature in the woods. Next thing you know, you got like fucking 300 people just combing the goddamn woods because they ain't got nothing fucking better to do. It's like, does that really help you at all? Because I feel like if anything, it's going to make it harder. You can't mention your location at all. Like, your location doesn't exist. There's no creatures. It's just boring ass fucking woods, nothing around, like nothing to see here, people.
Well, piggybacking off of that, President Theodore Roosevelt, cryptid hunter.
Yeah, the cryptid hunting legend.
Yeah, allegedly considered postponing an African safari to hunt for the Snallygaster. So there you go. These stories did not work.
So what do we got here now? We got the Jersey Devil, we got the Snallygaster, and we got an ape-man that he encountered. So that's 3 of the fucking high ones right there that Theodore Roosevelt has gone after.
Yeah, we could just do a President Roosevelt cryptid grab bag at some point.
Dude, why not? I want to dive into like his specific encounters of like trying to hunt these things.
Yeah, that would be a fun one.
Because apparently he didn't go on this one, but we at least know he went after the New Jersey Devil, and he has writings about seeing an ape man. So like at least he got 2 that he definitely had some type of something with.
Well, and he thought about this one, but just couldn't pull the trigger. He had to go on safari instead. Hold on tight, guys. This is our last ad break. But if you've got some free time, don't forget to check out the awesome friends of the show. I Know SQUATCH, Snarly Yow Natural Products, Crypto Teology, and Big Ape Threads.
And our other friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with additional discounts and credits available down in the show notes. And we are back, so let's hop right in.
So, also, just a few kind of odds and ends before we round this one out. The Smithsonian Institute allegedly offered a reward for anyone who captured a Snallygaster.
Just like the Giants, it's going to disappear.
Yeah, when have they ever been involved in anything nefarious?
When you think of the Smithsonian, just always think of the scene at the end of the first Indiana Jones with, all the different, the room with just all the fucking boxes, and then the music playing, and the guy just pushes it down the road and it disappears forever.
It belongs in a museum.
In the basement of a museum, never to be seen again.
In 1982, allegedly, the Snallygaster was added to the Maryland Endangered Species list, but people have kind of disputed this and never really found like rock solid evidence that this actually happened.
Oh, I'm sure it was just probably like a publicity ploy just for fun,
like a joke. Yeah, because like in recent years, the Snallygaster has like actually become like kind of like a folk icon in the area. And there's like a lot of like whiskey distilleries and ice cream parlors and breweries and things like that use like Snallygaster imagery or the name in their product. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Side note that I think is pretty cool too. You know how states have like their official bird, official tree, official all this kind of shit? So states are starting to recognize official folklore, which I think is really, really cool. So it's like, obviously New Jersey's is the New Jersey Devil, but it's cool that we're getting to a point now where people are actually interested in these folklore stories, that states are now saying like, this is our official folklore story. Like that's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, the more people talk about things like this, the better it is for everybody. I mean, you're keeping history alive, and then that's a good springboard for people to get into more weird esoteric topics like we talk about on the show. So.
I mean, just in general though, like you're keeping folklore alive, which is what's important, because it's like, people don't think about it, but this is our modern folklore, like years down the road, like people are going to say like, oh, what kind of creatures these people talk about? And like, this is going to be the stuff. So it's like these stories can completely die out, or you can keep them alive, at least if you don't believe them, as folklore. So at least with that, it's like you can get an image, if you don't believe it at all, of like what the people were dealing with at the time. Because like, regardless, whenever you start diving into these creature stories, they always mirror that civilization at that time's exact like fears in society. That's why like all the Native American stuff, it's always like, you know, don't go off on your own during the winter, you know, don't fucking cannibalize people, don't stay near to the river. Like it shows their biggest fear. So it's fascinating all in the same, because it's like not just a story, but it like gives you a picture of like what people were afraid of at that time, what they were dealing with at the time. Like it gives you like a feel for the people of the time.
Yeah, and like if you end up going back in time in a DeLorean, like don't get seduced by your mother. Same type deal.
That's
the official folklore of Twin Pines, California, or where the fuck they were at in Back to the Future.
I don't think there would be enough Brillo pads for that situation. I feel like there's just not enough Brillo pads, man. You know those scenes where they're like dumping bleach on their skin and they're just fucking scrubbing? Like, there's just not enough in the world, man.
Not enough Brillo pads. Anyway,
can you imagine how fucked up you would feel in your head if you went back in time and you're like, damn, that is a hot woman. And then they're like, oh, this is my name. And you're like, fuck, I just thought my mom was hot. Like,
well, I mean, in Marty's defense, I mean, I don't think it was his doing. But anyway, Lorraine was just a horn dog. So,
I mean, that makes it worse too.
I mean, that Michael J. Fox, that's a good looking man. I mean, in his puffy vest, who are we to argue with her? All right, this has gone sufficiently off the rails. That's all I got for the Snallygaster. All right, y'all. With that, we're done here tonight. Shayn, if anybody wants to get up with us for any reason whatsoever, tell them how they can do that.
Either one, you guys can get a hold of us through email, which is bizarreencounters@outlook.com, or you guys can get a hold of us through social media. Instagram or Facebook are the ones that we are the most active on, of course. Or you guys can get a hold of us through the submission form, which is available on the link tree, and you can use that submission form link to either one, contact us, or two, report an encounter. All goes to the same email now. Make it quick and easy for you guys. And number four, the fourth way that you guys can get a hold of us is through the hotline. And with the hotline, you can text it, you can call it, whatever you guys want to do. And that number is 313-364-1551. And if you missed that number, it, of course, is available down in the show description.
And as always, all this shit is in the link tree in the show description.
And just like most of the stories we talked about today, we always keep it weird over here. We keep it bizarre, if you dare say. So guys, always, just like us, and especially like that guy over there, the big bad Boo Daddy, always stay bizarre. Bizarre.
Marty, we gotta put the plutonium in the flux capacitor.